My doctoral dissertation is based on the successes and challenges of adult Hindi learners in the US universities to understand the things that are going right for the students and the things that are challenging. And one of the few challenges that people had were that curriculum was not structured or the teaching methodology was not standardized. So live classes can't really be replaced because we can have instruction as well as interaction and a lot of speaking practice and receive feedback at the same time. So one of the things that distinguishes our academy is that we provide live group or one-on-one instruction. Our curriculum is very structured and it gives you the exact path that you will be taking as you build your proficiency, less confusion, and the students are able to make rapid progress.
Hello and welcome to the Indian Diaspora Podcast. This is your host Rahul. Today's episode is about learning Hindi outside of India. We are joined by Dr. Sonia Sharma, who is a renowned Hindi scholar based out of New York, USA. And she is associated with premium institutes like Stanford, Berkeley, and Columbia University. So, Dr. Sonia Sharma, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest. It's a pleasure and honor to be here in this podcast for Indian Diaspora. Hi, everyone.
Welcome. So, Dr. Sonia, tell us more about yourself.
Yes. So, as you previously stated, I'm based in New York. I'm also an award winning professor in Hindi, and I've taught over the last 20 plus years at various institutions in the US, such as Stanford University, UC Berkeley, Columbia. As well as teaching members of the US Armed Forces at the Defense Language Institute.
Excellent.
Mhm.
And I believe we are doing this episode in English because a lot of our listeners and audiences may not know Hindi or are learning Hindi for the first time. They might not be Indians or Indian second generation Indian Americans, right? So uh,
Yes.
Hindi
We
बहुत
want to
प्यारी
be able to
भाषा है,
do.
लेकिन this podcast is in English.
Yes.
All right, lovely. Now, I'm going to ask a very simple question. Why
Okay.
Hindi? Why learn Hindi in this era?
Yes, and that's a great question. Of course, we need to know English because that's the lingua franca of career and business. But my mission is that alongside English, we also need to know Hindi if that is the language of our heritage. In other words, it's important to know your heritage language as well. So if you're interested in learning Hindi because it interests you or it's part of your heritage, then yes, I would completely encourage you to also know Hindi because it is the lingua franca of the stories of our ancestors, the art forms in terms of dance or song or film. These are the important elements of the cultural capital that is there encoded in the languages of our heritage. So, by knowing them, we can connect and reconnect with the whole ness of our identity or the fullness of our identity. And that's why it's important, in addition to English, to knowing your heritage language as well, or knowing Hindi as well.
So it's reconnecting to your heritage, your lingua franca, as you said. And for those who are not Indian or of Indian origin, and I'm
Yes.
sure a lot of them are Indophiles and learning Hindi,
Right.
why should they learn Hindi?
Right. So a lot of my clients are Americans of non Indian heritage
Mhm.
because they are married into Indian families, for example, or they're interested in India for work, research, or travel.
Hmm.
So they also join my classes. And Hindi per se is becoming more and more relevant in today's global economy because India is one of the fastest growing economy. I mean, in the last 10 years, the Indian economy has grown by $4.3 trillion.
Hmm.
And in addition to that, Hindi allows people to go around the Indian subcontinent and be understood or understand other people. And it allows access to Bollywood, which is the most prolific film industry in the whole world. So we get access to that as well. And a lot of people also reconnect with Hindi or take Hindi classes because of their interest in scholarly research, in anthropology or business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right from being married to an Indian family to the soft power that India brings in, right?
Yes.
Bollywood, the culture, and of course the economy. How can we ignore that? So
Yes.
various strong reasons to learn Hindi. Uh, Now, Dr. Sonia, your academy's name is Dr. Sonia Sharma Academy.
Correct.
Uh, Tell us more about your approach. Um, what makes you different, and how do you impart uh, grounded education for people to really absorb and imbibe the language and practice it in every day?
Right. There are a lot of things that distinguish us from other sources of learning Hindi. Um, my dissertation, I'm a doctor, so my doctoral dissertation is um, based on the successes and challenges of adult Hindi learners in the US universities. So I got a chance firsthand to understand, what are the things that are going right for the students, and what are the things that are challenging. And
Mhm.
one of the few challenges that people had were that often the classes or the curriculum was not structured. So this was hard for them to follow. The vocabulary was a little bit random, and sometimes there will be grammar, at other times no. There, so that curriculum was not structured, or the teaching methodology was not standardized.
Okay.
So it gave them additional challenges. Or people who learn through, for example, apps like Duolingo, or so this is helpful as a supporting resource in between classes, but really people are finding that live classes can't really be replaced because we can have instruction as well as interaction, and a lot of speaking practice and receive feedback at the same time. So one of the things that distinguishes our academy is that we provide live group or one-on-one instruction. We don't provide recorded things.
Mm.
So it's happening as we speak. So that allows you to ask questions and absorb the information and practice it as much as possible so that you gain confidence as a Hindi speaker. And our curriculum, to address the issues that I named earlier, our curriculum is very structured, and it gives you the exact path that you will be taking as you build your proficiency. So there's less confusion, and the students are able to make rapid progress.
Okay, got it. And I'm trying to empathize with somebody who does not know Hindi, and I'm going to from that mind I'm going to ask something. So among
Yeah.
polyglots or language learners,
Yes.
there is this thing about how difficult is a language. For example, Spanish is generally seen to be an approachable language. A lot of English
Yes.
words could be in Spanish, or
Right.
let's say Mandarin is seen as a difficult language because of the four tonalities out there, or learning the script. And of course, then there is Hungarian and Finnish of the world, right?
Yes.
You know, where does Hindi stay in this scale? Is this a difficult language or an approachable language?
I would say that it's right comfortably in the middle.
Okay.
So it's not too difficult. And I say that, of course, I'm a native Hindi speaker. So we all have that bias, when we are native speakers of the language. But having taught it to non Indians over the last 20 years, I can reasonably say that it's not difficult in the sense that most of it has logic to it. About 80% of the language can be explained with grammar logic, and it's easy to follow, and you just practice it and get more and more comfortable over time. So,
Okay.
in that sense, it's a very approachable language.
Okay.
Of course, it's difficult as a new language with a new non English script will be,
Hmm.
because we have to learn the script from scratch, and it has many sounds that the English language doesn't have.
Yeah.
But I have seen many native English speakers get very comfortable and proficient in Hindi within a matter of 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Oh, that's
Yes.
impressive. And I had now I'm going to actually go to the script.
Yeah.
I had a friend from China
Yeah.
uh, who it's very interesting when you see the world from other people's eyes.
Yes.
Once, when he visited India, he just could not understand not seeing different characters because let's say Chinese, every character is different, and you sort of write this. For example, friend is Pang Yo, so Pang as one character, Yo
Okay.
has another character. Whereas in Devanagari, we
Hmm.
would write Dost, and we would have a strike on top of it. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so and that his observation of the Devanagari script made me understand how we from India might take for granted easy deciphering of the script. But I want to learn from your experiences, a European mind, an American mind, a
Yes.
Hispanic mind, a
Right.
Latino mind, etc. When they are approaching Hindi and they see the Devanagari script for the first time, where they might not have a concept of, horizontal line on the
Yeah.
top, joining everything all. How do they go through that process of understanding the script?
It's very easy for them to understand that part.
Interesting.
For all new learners, they're very easily able to understand that a line will identify a character or keep a word together, because we don't see it more as a strike, but more as like something that's hanging, or keeping the word together or keeping the letters together. So it's very visually comfortable to
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
And other things like, Hindi doesn't have capital letters
Yeah.
like English does, or Hindi doesn't have silent letters. That
Right.
makes it easier, because you don't have to guess now,
Yeah.
where the sound is coming from, or what to pronounce, what not to pronounce. Of course, we have to learn the accent in the language. Where is the emphasis? So that part is there. But for the most part, like visually, shape wise, it is not difficult per
Hmm.
se, for non Indians to understand it, especially because it has a very good pattern to it.
Got it. You mentioned accent, and you know th- that made me realize there are so many nuances to speaking
Yeah,
good Hindi. Ucharan, like the half
exactly.
ch in ucharan, or jnana,
Yeah,
gyan, or aksha in akshay, right?
right.
How does a foreign mind and the muscle memory that their languages they've grown in, how do they transition to the unique word combinations of the etc., and the
Yeah.
nuances of the Hindi language pronunciation and accent?
Yeah, yeah. So accent they learn through more listening practice. A lot of the Indian Americans, for example, they've grown up hearing some Hindi in the household. So
Mhm.
those nuances of pronunciation are familiar to them, although they are learning how to speak, how to produce the speech. They may be exposed to the sounds, but they still have to practice how do you respond to in a conversation. And for non-Indians, it's um, relatively easy to follow the aspirated sounds, the one that are heavier, like the and like that. It's harder to pronounce the unaspirated, which English, for the most part, doesn't have because it has more aspiration than unaspiration.
What
So
does aspiration mean for those who do not know?
right. So aspirated means that you have like a breath of air while you're saying it, like when we say the or ha or
Bh of Bharata.
exactly.
Okay.
So that is the aspiration, and English has that, so it's easy to get those sounds.
Okay.
But with unaspirated, like pronouncing ka, without the sound, without the breath of air, so that is much harder.
Interesting.
But I have seen people practice it and get it within a matter of, one or two classes. It's
Very encouraging. I thought Hindi might be difficult for, those who are not from the culture and not,
yes,
grown there, but it's very encouraging to know that, hey, it's approachable, it's medium difficulty, and within 2 to 3 years, you can get a hang of it.
exactly. And this is why I have my own academy, because my brand of teaching and the curriculum and the methodology that I use makes it very accessible.
Yeah.
Um, it makes it easy to learn. It's not overwhelming. The methods that I use keep the fun in the language learning.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah,
All right. So,
yeah.
let's move on to grammar now, right? So we
Okay.
saw, different aspects. So, the classic Indo-European language tree, it's fascinating,
Mhm.
Sanskrit, the mother to Devanagari, and Hindi, and ancient Germanic have common roots, and you have this different languages that blossomed from them, right? Uh, Now,
Exactly.
my hypothesis, uh, Hindi belonging to this Indo-European language tree, could this be playing a role in Hindi being relatively, I wouldn't say easier, but approachable to learn by rest of the world? Any thoughts on that?
I think so. I think so. A lot of the words I have seen are similar in sound to some of the words in English. And of course, Hindi has evolved through borrowing from different languages as well. Like we have borrowings from not only Sanskrit, but Perso Arabic. We have borrowings from Portuguese, even. So it is an interesting mix, and it does make it easier to understand the vocabulary or remember it, because essentially, many of the languages are coming from, as you very well know, from Proto-Indo-European.
Right.
So it does play a role. I think that especially people who are more aware of Latin and Greek and the other Romance languages, they learn Hindi more quickly,
Interesting.
easily.
Okay.
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. Fascinating. And, going back to sort of colonial times and even before that, as traders were in India or the British were in India, they very well knew not only Hindi but other vernacular languages of the Indian subcontinent, right? Like Bengali or Gujarati or even Dravidian languages, right? So the rest of the world has learned Hindi in the past uh, because of the reasons you mentioned. The economy. India was a prominent economy, and how could you not be part of it and be ingrained in it? So it's fascinating. All right, lovely. Now, moving on to your students and those who take Hindi courses from you. Let's go to the Indian American segment, right?
Okay.
A lot of second generation, third generation Indian Americans, right? You know, we might see different shades of it, right? One of them, who might have grown in a very traditional household, they might know Hindi or know some of it. To the other extreme, right?
Mhm.
They might carry some weight or baggage of not wanting to learn Hindi and perhaps discovering it later. Talk to us about the spectrum of people you see who come as students to you, and then talk about the journey of learning and adopting Hindi into their day to day life.
Right. So, as you very well pointed out, the two different ends of the spectrum. So, on one end, we have students that have been exposed to the sounds of Hindi growing up, so they are able to understand it,
Yeah.
but they're not able to produce a response as fluently as they would like to. So they already have that background. They are called heritage learners.
Okay.
So they pick up the language much faster because they have that background. And then on the other hand, we have people who may not always have like a friendly relationship with Hindi. Maybe there was pressure in their environment to uh, understand or be able to speak Hindi, and they weren't able to do that at that time because they didn't have the types of resources they needed.
Mhm.
Because we have different types of learners. Some are verbal, others are auditory, and yet others are visual. So one of the things I do in my classes is to know what type of learner the student is so
Okay.
that we can customize the lessons and classes based on their needs, based on their interests, and based on their goals also.
Okay.
Some want to read the language, be able to read it for the rest of their lives, and others would just like to brush up on their speaking and conversation. So it really matters, what your goals are, what is your background, what is your prior exposure, what type of learner are they.
Okay.
And it's good for me to be aware of the type of learner also because um, not only do we have a learner type, but we also have a teaching type, right? So my style could be, for example, verbal and audio.
All right.
But then, if the student is visual, then I make extra effort to provide more visual resources. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay. So every student is different, and therefore the teaching style adapts to the student.
Exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
And that's, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, that is the definition of an excellent teacher. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Now, you mentioned visuals and audio, right? Now, we have a rich cultural heritage, right? Be it
Yes.
our music, mentioned Bollywood, but also literature, you know,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
From Munshi Premchand, for example, and his
Yeah.
literature
Yeah.
to, let's say, we have even regional literature, and
Yeah.
I know, like, I would go, let's say, to literature coming from Maharashtra. That's not Hindi, but uh, that's part of the culture fabric of India. Or
Correct.
literature coming from Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore, or Gujarat, and the authors there. The point is, how do you take, the entire Indian subcontinent culture, uh, entertainment, literature, music, history, and
Right.
how do you socialize and contextualize that to your learners?
Exactly. So, language and culture are interlinked and they feed into each other. So, along with language, we bring in cultural elements such as festivals.
Okay,
Like
yeah,
students at Stanford celebrated, for example, both Holi and Diwali, and they were exposed to the real meanings behind it, why we're doing X, Y, and Z, and they were exposed to the dance forms and the different cuisines from
yeah,
India. So we do that through. They also made rangolis, for example. So they were exposed to the various cultural elements through festivals, and then we incorporate, of course, Bollywood is a great language learning resource. So we screen films and we have a discussion about it, depending on the level, whether it's in target language, Hindi, or in English if it's an elementary or a beginner audience.
Yeah.
So we incorporate film screenings, and alongside we also do incorporate literature, but that is more at the intermediate or advanced level. That's when we bring
I
in short
see.
stories,
Okay.
poems, and other things. And that is more of a jumping off point because we have to be able to use it. We're
Right.
not reading it, reading the short stories or poems for the sake of doing that. I mean, that can be done as for personal pleasure later, but in the classes we are doing that so that we can communicate with each other. So
Mm.
I would say that I bring it back to verbal communication.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Next, Dr. Sonia, let's move to an interesting concept of English. And it's just not English, it's contemporary colloquial language, right? For example, there is French and then there is street French, you know? And if you've seen the movie, Three Idiots, right?
Yes.
There was
Yes.
this Chatur character, which was quite ridiculed, right? And I want to approach this from a point of empathy, right? When you're teaching an outsider a language, right? You have to approach it academically, right? This is the grammar. These are the proper words. But in life, we don't talk that way, you know. We would throw in English words, or we have contemporary colloquial words, right? And that's what makes it authentic, you know.
Yes.
So,
Sure.
how do you approach teaching proper Hindi to somebody and then take them towards contemporary colloquial, the way we speak style?
Right. Right. That's a good question. I'd say I'm a moderate in that because I do make my students aware that we have words for these things
Okay,
in the Hindi language. For example, take the example of school.
right,
So we use school. मैं school जाता हूँ. Okay.
right.
So, but we do have a word for school in Hindi, which is vidyalaya.
Vidyalaya.
So, but it doesn't get used that much in real life.
Right.
In day-to-day Hindi speaking, people will generally say, "आज आप कितने बजे स्कूल जा रहे हैं?"
Mhm.
So they will not say, "आज आप कितने बजे विद्यालय जा रहे हैं?" So people might look at them funny if they are saying that. So it's an interesting dance. It's an interesting play between um, being aware that there are words for it, but being also aware that we have a brand of English going on in real modern day to day life. But at the same time, as somebody who has dedicated a large part of my life toward Hindi teaching and staying connected to the heritage and all of the capital that Hindi brings, I would say that we also have to be cautious. We can, for example, there is no issue with having English, but I would caution against replacing a large part of Hindi with English, and then, to the point where it's not really even Hindi. So it's basically watered down version of English. And so where does Hindi begin and where does Hindi end? It brings up interesting questions. And so I would caution against that extreme, but at the same time I have a moderate approach, to like I will encourage people to not ridicule the actual Hindi words that are there, because that's part of our heritage. We may not use it now, but just like in English, Shakespeare used a lot of words that are no longer in use in English. But at the same time, they are not, in Hindi, they are not antiquated.
Mm.
So if they were, it would sound funny.
Yeah.
If we started speaking the version of Hindi that, for example, that was spoken in the Ramayana,
Mm.
it would not go over very well, in day-to-day Hindi conversations.
Mm.
So I would, stay away from completely converting into English and still calling it English. And at the same time, I want to be able to also respect,
Mhm.
history that we are coming from,
Yeah.
and adopt kind of a middle road now, where we can have conversations and be understood in Hindi, and still have the integrity
Yeah.
of Hindi. You know, like, because there are huge differences between
Yeah.
the way Hindi is encoded and the way English is encoded.
Mhm.
For example, the verb in Hindi always goes at the very end.
Mhm.
That's not always the case in English. So, and there are many U's in Hindi. We only have one U in English. So there are so many differences in the two languages, even though they might share some, you know, um, common heritage. But at the same time, we can't say that one language has replaced another, and that is still Hindi. You know.
Yeah. Fascinating insights here, right? One is, contemporary world of evolving languages, but the second is the purity of it, and that's what the
Yeah.
French space, for example, the Académie Française, is an institute that maintains the purity of French, but then
Yeah.
there is street French, or it's
Yeah.
very interesting when civilizations from one nation go outside. A
Yes.
lot of people, when French went to Quebec in Canada, the Quebecois French is supposed to be a more authentic version of French, right? And contemporary Parisian French has moved on. You know,
Yes.
wondering
Yes.
an interesting perspective about the Indian diaspora.
Yes.
How is Hindi in India evolving further, and how is the diaspora Hindi, or particularly here in the USA, evolving over time? Is that going to be more purer version among certain households and certainly academia? You know, that is to be seen in the future. But what are your thoughts on this, Dr. Sonia?
Yeah, I would say that, we whenever I go back to India, I do see that not many young people are communicating in Hindi, and there's this feeling that perhaps Hindi is not as cool or up to speed as English, or for social media, etc. Mostly we use English, and that's a great idea to know English and be well versed in that language of global business and economy. But at the same time, we are also losing ground as Hindi speakers, because not only do we have this unfair comparison between English and Hindi. For example, we have this comparison between Hindi and English. I personally think that there is no comparison.
Hmm.
They are completely different facets of the culture.
Mhm.
And in fact, even India has both English and Hindi as two official languages,
Yeah.
because we couldn't choose between one, between the two. So we had to have both. And
Yeah.
this is symbolic of our heritage too, as Indians, or with Indian roots,
Right.
because we know English because the British were there for over 300 years in India. So we know English. We have some history with English, but at the same time, I would encourage us to also respect and value the languages of our heritage,
Yeah.
and keep that also on the same pedestal as English. It's not a fair comparison, because those two are coming from two different points of the culture.
Right.
And they're both necessary, because when we know English, we have access to everything in the world. But when we know Hindi, or our heritage language as well, then we know the aspects of the culture that are, for example, not translated into English, or that can't be translated into English.
Hmm.
So we have access to that. And this is important for future generations as well. to be able to teach our kids the language of our heritage, we have to maintain it and have the same value, respect, and status that we give to other languages, because all languages are beautiful and have that same respect and status.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
Thank
Now,
you.
there is a use case or there is a scenario I want to discuss where authentic pure Hindi is apt. And you correct me if I'm wrong. Uh,
Okay.
you know, formal occasions, or let's say, you're on a stage. Let me put it that way. So let's take Kaun Banega Crorepati. Uh, Sir Amitabh Bachchan is proud of his Shuddha Hindi, which is
Yes.
not ridiculous, not laughable, right? He would
No.
use pure Hindi words, and often, let's say that, so again, some personalities are known to be using pure Hindi. So he
Yeah.
would say a Vidyalaya, he would not say school,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Or you're on a stage and you're giving a speech. In that, I assume it's apt to use pure Hindi words. It's only when you're with your friends and you're on the street, you're having fun, right? That's when you sort of intermingle English with Hindi and you have this English genre. So I'm
Exactly.
right in this assumption, like formal occasions is where pure Hindi is apt.
Yes, whenever a formal register is needed in
Yeah,
formal situations,
yeah,
it is appropriate to use good yeah, standard modern Hindi.
right.
Just like, for example, when Modi ji gives his
Yeah,
speech,
yeah,
we
right.
hear fairly, I would say 99% of that is in Hindi.
Yeah,
And he's using a language that is accessible to people. He's not using antiquated words, or I don't know. So that is a good example of, just in that register that is used. And then you are right, at parties perhaps, or in other informal situations,
yeah,
we would use a version of English. But it's even English is indicative. It's sending a message to the listener that we know both Hindi and English.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Okay. Next topic. Let's move to Hindi at the global stage. Yeah.
Okay.
And let me set the context. Let's take
Okay.
Russian. Russian has this sphere of influence, let's say, not only Russia, but Central Asia. A lot of people in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, or Belarus,
Yeah.
speak Russian, right? Or if you take Farsi, Farsi has a state, has a sphere, from Iran to Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, etc. Spanish has a sphere, from Spain to South America, so on and
Right.
so forth, right? Uh, I'm going to ask the obvious, what is the sphere of Hindi as a language, right? That's a very technical question. But second, even beyond the sphere, right? What is the role of Hindi in the global diplomacy, politics, culture, soft power, let's say Bollywood, you know? How do you see that, the sphere of Hindi in the world?
So Hindi is where Hindi speakers are in the Indian diaspora. So it not only lives in North India and parts of the Indian subcontinent where Hindi is spoken as a native language,
Yeah,
but it's also there all over the globe wherever Hindi is spoken. We have various countries where they've developed their own version of Hindi. So that is also there. So it has a big sphere because it's the third most spoken language in the whole world.
all right, I want to take a pause. Hindi
Yeah.
is the third most spoken language in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, carrying on.
Not only that, it's if we think about Hindi and English being the official languages of India, which is the
Okay,
largest democracy in the whole world,
right,
right? So now we have one Indic language, Hindi, being the official language of the largest democracy in the whole world,
right.
right? So that gives it a huge sphere, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay. Which makes me, we reflected about, how languages change, but they have to be kept pure.
Yeah.
I'll straight away ask, do we need an Académie Française for Hindi? Meaning, do we need a body that says, these are the rules in which Hindi should stay for it to be pure, or that is not needed for Hindi that as it emerged in northern India?
Yeah, I don't think that right now we need a separate body, or the need to keep it pure. I have different views about what pure means.
Hmm.
Also, I would that's a topic for a whole another podcast,
Right.
right? So, um, but it's if it works to convey the message and the speaker is being understood, then it counts as a language. I would say that we don't need an academy per se to maintain the purity, very strictly defined purity of Hindi, but we do need to clearly understand, and I think that maybe we can promote this idea further. Maybe a body needs to be established to promote this idea further, that Hindi has the same respect or same level of respect as does English.
Yeah. I love that.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so we do need somebody to remind us that that is the case. Hindi has its own body of literature, own forms, art forms, its own films and its own everything, which I'm jointly calling cultural capital,
Yeah.
right? So, and English has its own, though they
Yeah.
are both wonderful.
Yeah.
And as the diaspora grows in different countries,
Yeah.
I would encourage all of us to not only enjoy English, but also maintain the language of our heritage, of our ancestors, because that way we are embracing the fullness of our identity. We are not choosing between the two.
Yeah.
We are not rejecting a part of our soul. We are accepting both parts.
I love that. And that duality can be maintained, and it's a superpower, I would argue. Meaning,
Yes,
you can easily transition across, different worlds. And for those who are Indian Americans, just imagine this: you have access to, a $30 trillion U.S. economy and, a $4 trillion Indian economy, which is going to grow and grow and grow, right? So, with Hindi and English, you have, you know, two prominent economies and
two
one point
prominent democracies.
democracies
Yeah,
as part of your identity. That's lovely.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's very unique. Yes.
yeah, lovely. Dr. Sonia, speaking of diaspora, a lot of Hindi speaking people from the heartland, especially Bhojpuri people, were taken to Trinidad, Tobago, Guyana,
Yes,
Suriname,
yes.
Fiji on the other side of the world. uh, have you looked into how Hindi has evolved, uh, remained, transformed in these different geographical and cultural bubbles? For example, I'm reminded of something called chutney music. It is, it's Bhojpuri music and calypso music combined, and it's lovely. If you those of you who have not listened to chutney music, do listen to that. But coming to the question, uh,
Yeah.
how has Hindi uh, grown in the diaspora beyond USA in different parts of the world?
Yes, I have heard of different versions of Hindi, as I was mentioning earlier. That is a blend of the native language of the place where Indians went, Hindi speakers went, and they're developed like their own version of that. So now we have the Fijian Hindi and the Trinidadian accent of Hindi, and we have all sorts of varieties within the diaspora. I'm not too familiar with the. That's not been my field to study or investigate further. Yeah, but
But
I
I
do.
think scholarly work needs to be done in this space, and
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
an
So
evolving. Yeah,
there's a lot more research that needs to be done,
yeah,
and a lot more dissertations that need to be written, and
yeah,
a body of scholarly work
yeah.
needs to be done in that. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. So this episode has been about Hindi. It's a beautiful language. It's a language that has stayed with us since independence in 1947, been part of entertainment, Bollywood, and now the diaspora. And cultural custodians like yourself, Dr. Sonia, you're taking the language, you're keeping it alive and you're taking this further in the diaspora. Uh, with this, I would go to the last segment of the discussion, which is rapid fire. We'll ask some fun rapid fire questions and just to see some interesting insights coming from you.
Okay.
All right. Are you ready
Okay.
for that, Dr. Sonia?
I will try.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Your first question is your favorite Hindi word.
My favorite Hindi word? I don't think I have one. You
Shoot, what comes to mind?
There are so many. You have Shama,
It's a beautiful word.
is one. Yeah,
What
yeah.
does Shama mean for those who do not know?
It means forgiveness.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful word. The way it sounds,
Yeah.
it allows one to release whatever is there and move
Mm.
forward into a more positive territory.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful answer.
yeah.
Next question. A Hindi word that does not have an English equivalent.
ah, mm, I that would be a challenging one. I'm not sure one comes to mind in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of them we do have an approximation
Hmm.
in English, and we are able to explain and capture the concept somewhat.
Yeah.
In fact, we have several of the Hindi words that have actually made it into the Oxford English Dictionary.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's yeah, but none comes to mind right now. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah.
In fact, let's discuss that. What is one of the popular Hindi word that made it to the Oxford Dictionary? Let the world know that.
Yeah, there are so many that have made it there, and one is jugaad. You know, yeah.
Love that.
So,
Love that word. What
and
is jugaad for those who don't know it?
so it's basically a makeshift solution, being innovative, given the limitations of the resources, and coming up with a solution. So there are so many words, even the word dekho.
Yeah.
The British have took it during their time in India, and they started using it as like have a deco,
Interesting. Yeah.
like that. And the word shampoo is drawn from Hindi,
Yeah.
from the word champi,
Wow.
um, you know, etc. So there are a lot of like a plethora of words that are have been absorbed into the Oxford
Yeah.
English
I think jugaad is a Hindi word that does not have exact English equivalent.
I was thinking that, but it's it requires more research.
Right.
Like I tend to just respond with only what I know accurately. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
This is your English equivalent here, Dr. Sonia. All right. Next, good question.
right.
Who's your favorite Hindi poet?
Mm, there are ones in different eras, and I like Makhanlal Chaturvedi. Yeah.
All right. Beautiful. Beautiful. And one Hindi body of work, literature, whatever,
Yeah.
that Hindi learners should read in their lifetime.
Hmm. Um, I would recommend the novel that was written by my Indian diasporic acclaimed author and professor, Dr. Susham Bedi. So her novel was Lotna,
Okay.
and another one was Havan. So I would definitely recommend reading those.
Okay.
And from the body of work that was produced in India, one of the uh, ones I would recommend is Hari Bindi. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Got it. Lovely.
yeah.
If Hindi had a sister language,
Hmm.
what would which one is Hindi's sister language?
I don't know. That's a hard question.
Urdu? No.
I I think that at some point Hindi and Urdu, because they share a vocabulary and grammar, they are somewhat of a same language. Other than there are script differences, um, and then there are differences at the advanced level where Urdu draws more from Arabic and Hindi draws more from Sanskrit. So they diverge at higher levels. But it's, I guess we can call them sisters, because they share a biological bond,
Yeah,
but they do have their separate identities too.
very much
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah.
I love it when I can watch shows from Pakistan and where they're talking in Urdu and I can understand most of it,
Exactly.
and
That's,
vice versa. There's a huge love and following of Hindi movies in Pakistan.
yeah.
So, yeah, lovely. And finally, to bring it home, fill in the blanks. One should learn Hindi because,
Because it's beautiful and lyrical.
love that. Love that. With that, Dr. Sonia, this is the first episode we have had on our heritage, our lingua franca, the language Hindi. Maybe next episode we will do in Hindi someday.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Dr. Sonia, for coming and giving your scholarly insights, but also your practical insights as a teacher of Hindi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and have this wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dhanyavad.
धन्यवाद.